Red Sox fans, please stop putting Jarren Duran in every trade talk. Jarren Duran, we got to realize, had an
The 2026 MLB offseason has barely had time to settle, and yet the ground is already shifting beneath some of baseball's most recognizable franchises. Every winter, there are a handful of moves that don't just change a roster, but change the conversation. Trades that start as rumors, then turn into whispers, and eventually force fans and front offices alike to ask an uncomfortable question: is this actually possible? One of those questions now hangs squarely over Boston and New York, and at the center of it is a player who, just a few years ago, was viewed as a foundational piece of the Red Sox future: Jarren Duran. A mock trade making the rounds has ignited debate across the league, and not because it's outrageous or unrealistic, but because it feels uncomfortably plausible. The idea is simple on the surface. The Boston Red Sox send Jarren Duran to the New York Mets. In return, Boston receives a package headlined by elite prospect Brandon Sprout, fellow top 100 talent Jacob Reimer, and young infielder Luis Angel Acuña. 3 players. One established big leaguer. And a deal that, depending on where you stand, either represents smart long-term planning or a dangerous gamble. The reason this conversation matters is not just about Jarren Duran as a player, but about where both of these franchises are heading. The Mets are operating in full win-now mode under Steve Cohen, a reality that has fundamentally changed how they approach talent acquisition. This is an organization that no longer flinches at financial commitments, that sees prospects as currency, and that is willing to take calculated risks if it means closing the gap between contention and championship. At the same time, the Red Sox find themselves at a crossroads, balancing the pressure to compete immediately with the necessity of rebuilding depth that has been steadily drained by recent aggressive moves. For Boston, the offseason has already been active. Major trades brought in established talent, but cost them significant prospect capital. The deals for Sonny Gray and Wilson Contreras signaled intent, but they also exposed a reality the organization cannot ignore forever. You can't keep borrowing from the future without eventually replenishing it. The farm system, once the envy of the league, has thinned. And while that doesn't mean the Red Sox are rebuilding, it does mean they have to be selective about which big league pieces are truly untouchable. Jarren Duran sits right in the middle of that dilemma. He's not a superstar in the traditional sense, but he's a rare commodity in today's game. An athletic outfielder with speed, defensive versatility, improving plate discipline, and years of team control remaining. He's exactly the kind of player that contending teams love to acquire, especially teams that believe they are one piece away from elevating their lineup. From the Mets' perspective, Duran is more than just an upgrade. He's a stabilizer. New York's offseason strategy has revolved around flexibility. They've explored the top of the free agent market, reportedly making serious offers for names like Kyle Tucker. But free agency is unpredictable, and even for a team with Cohen's resources, there are limits to how many massive contracts you can stack before roster balance becomes an issue. If the Mets fail to land their preferred free agent targets, the trade market becomes the next logical avenue. And unlike free agency, trades allow the Mets to address specific weaknesses without committing a decade of payroll to a single player. The outfield is one of those weaknesses. The departure of Brandon Nimmo earlier in the offseason left a hole that cannot be easily patched internally. Defensive reliability, on-base ability, and speed all took a hit. Jarren Duran checks those boxes. He brings energy, range, and the ability to impact games in ways that don't always show up in box scores. For a Mets team built around power, pitching, and star-level talent, adding a player like Duran could create balance that money alone can't buy. From Boston's side, the return is where this deal becomes truly interesting. Brandon Sprout is not just a throw-in. He's a consensus top 100 prospect widely viewed as a future impact player, with the tools to anchor a lineup or rotation depending on how his development unfolds. Jacob Reimer adds another high-upside bat, giving the Red Sox organizational depth they've been missing. And Luis Angel Acuña, while less heralded, represents the kind of versatile, near-ready talent that front offices quietly covet. Players like Acuña often end up being the glue pieces on competitive rosters, capable of stepping in when injuries strike or roles change. This isn't a quantity over quality trade. It's a calculated exchange of timelines. Boston gives up a known commodity who helps now. New York gives up potential in exchange for certainty. These are the kinds of trades that rarely look even at first glance, but often make sense in retrospect once organizational goals are fully understood. Still, the idea of trading Jarren Duran is not something Red Sox fans embrace easily. He represents development, paying off, patience rewarded. Letting go of a player like that invites criticism, especially if Boston struggles in the short term. But front offices don't operate on sentiment. They operate on probability, control, and value curves. Duran's value may never be higher than it is right now. His cost is manageable, his performance is established, and for a team looking to retool without tearing everything down, moving him could be the lever that resets multiple areas of the organization at once. The broader league context also matters. The Mets are not the only team sniffing around impact outfielders. Competition drives up prices. If New York waits too long, another suitor could step in with a better offer or a more immediate solution. For Boston, that same urgency applies in reverse. The longer they wait, the more uncertain the market becomes. Prospect values fluctuate, injuries happen, windows close faster than teams expect. What makes this mock trade resonate is how well it aligns with both teams' incentives. The Mets don't need to win the trade on paper, they need to win games. Duran helps them do that. The Red Sox don't need to contend for a title in 2026 at all costs. They need sustainability. This package provides it. Of course, no trade exists in a vacuum. There are variables that could derail this scenario entirely. If the Mets land a marquee free agent like Kyle Tucker, the urgency to trade for Duran diminishes. If Boston identifies another path to replenishing its farm system, Duran becomes harder to justify moving. And there's always the human element. Players are not assets on a spreadsheet. Clubhouse dynamics, leadership roles, and internal evaluations all play a role in decisions like this. But the fact that this trade is being discussed seriously says something important about where both franchises are right now. The Mets are no longer a team content to wait. They are aggressive, opportunistic, and willing to use their prospect depth as leverage. The Red Sox, meanwhile, are navigating the uncomfortable middle ground between rebuilding and contending, a place where difficult choices are unavoidable. If this trade were to happen, the immediate reaction would likely be divided. Some would praise Boston for selling high and restocking intelligently. Others would criticize them for weakening an already volatile lineup. Mets fans would debate whether giving up that much future value is worth the present upgrade. Analysts would argue over who won, as if trades are decided the moment ink hits paper rather than years later. But that's the nature of modern baseball. Teams are no longer judged solely on wins and losses. They're judged on process, on whether moves align with philosophy, on whether front offices act decisively when opportunity presents itself. And this mock trade, whether it ever becomes reality or not, captures that tension perfectly. It represents two organizations at different points on the competitive curve, both trying to maximize their advantage in an increasingly complex league. It's not flashy, it's not reckless, it's strategic. And those are the trades that tend to reshape teams quietly, without the fanfare of a $300 million contract, but with just as much impact. As the offseason continues, the Mets will remain linked to every major name on the market. The Red Sox will continue exploring ways to balance immediate competitiveness with long-term health. Somewhere between those two paths lies the possibility of a deal like this becoming real. The question isn't whether it's fair. The question isn't even whether it's likely. The real question is whether both sides believe this is the move that pushes them closer to where they want to be. Because if they do, then a trade that feels hypothetical today can become tomorrow's headline faster than anyone expects. And when that happens, the 2026 season won't just be remembered for what happened on the field, but for the moment when two franchises decided to redefine their futures with one bold exchange. Now it's your turn. Would you make this deal if you were running the Red Sox? Is Jarren Duran worth this kind of return, or is he the kind of player you build around, not trade away? And if you're a Mets fan, is this the type of aggressive move you want to see, even if it costs you elite prospects? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more MLB trade analysis and off-season coverage, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next.